So, you might have heard about this upcoming game called Baldur's Gate 3. And it has RPG somewhere in there. Camera view might look a bit similar to Lost Ark PoE Diablo. And if you're an MMORPG player, you might be thinking to yourself, yo, this one that's an RPG should be quite similar. Not really. And so in today's video, I will talk about what is Baldur's Gate 3, what you can expect from the game, and what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis. Maybe draw a parallel or a couple of parallels in between this and MMORPGs or ARPGs. Myself, I come from a lifetime of MMORPGs with a few hundred hours in Diablo 4 most recently, and I went into Baldur's Gate blind, discovered it last week, played about 90 hours, 80, 90 hours since then. So no life in the game right now because the game just won't let me be. It just gets more and more interesting somehow. However, I did have a lot of pleasant surprises, but also some surprises that I was like, okay, so that's how it works here. In my opinion, the game has two main selling points, two bigger reasons why it would keep you, why you would play it. And both of them involve building a character. On one hand, you have the massive story and the dialogue that drives progression, where role playing and your choices literally shape the world around you. And by role playing, I don't mean like acting all crazy and cringe, but instead creating, right? Creating a series of events your own way and seeing where it takes you. The dialogue itself is really, really in depth and very pleasant to listen to. It's not like I have experienced story and dialogue in my previous MMORPGs or games where you all end up in the same place and the choices that you make, generally speaking, they don't have any impact. Here, a big part of the game is to actually shape how the NPCs perceive you and where you want to go and who do you want to meet and how do you want to interact with a lot, like literally hundreds of NPCs around the world. As a small example from a sea of examples I could give is that your race will also affect how you are perceived in the world, if you can believe that. This was a major surprise by me because during these 90 hours so far that I've played, I got the opportunity to try several races. And the dialogue itself is actually completely different from one race to the other. The things people tell you and the way other NPCs make you, me, myself as a player, right in the chair, feel about them completely changes when I'm being called like an ugly pig or whatever. You know what? Fuck you, I'm gonna kill you. So then that completely changes my story and what I was intending to do. It's really interesting, even like from character customization going forward, how your story can be so different than someone else's story. The second selling point is the combat, which, same as the story and the dialogue, can be used as the main reason to play or your primary motivation in game. What I mean is that combat and everything that has to do with it, such as your class choice, your background choice, subclass, second class choice, spell choice, stat choice, is actually complex enough by itself to become a standalone reason why you would make the class, race, subclass choices, or to replay the game as, for example, a different class combination, a different four-man party, and see where that takes you. And since we're basically talking about combat, this was another topic that I wanted to discuss. It's a turn-based combat, but it has a special charm. It's just captivating if you allow it to be captivating, but at the same time, myself coming from MMORPGs and full action combat and stuff, I did find this one here to be, I don't want to say dull because it definitely was not that. It was interesting, but it felt slow. But then later on, the more I understood my spells, positioning, the classes, the more it intrigued me, right? The tactical side of it, the preparation side of it, the sounds for the spells really helped a lot because they are just absolutely gorgeous. The spell sounds and the casts that, a caster is saying out loud, just give me goosebumps all the time. And not to mention the fact that encounters themselves got more and more difficult to a point where I actually felt that I need to stop and I need to go read a little bit. It's still not the combat in MMORPGs or ARPGs. It's still not that reactive, kind of constantly pressing buttons type of combat, but it's very interesting in its own lane. Worth mentioning in the combat topic that you have a party of 4 that can be either yourself and 3 other heroes, or yourself and 1 other hero if you just want a party of 2, or it can actually be yourself and 3 other friends, 2 other friends, 1 other friend. that you play together and discover and go and do the combat and the story together. There's also friendly fire, so a fireball from your saucer can be deadly to everyone around. Another thing is the environment, which can play a role in combat, and this was the first game where I actually felt that many of these environment based tricks are even better than my own skills. Things such as oil puddles or oil barrels can be set on fire by a fire spell, or water on the ground can be electrified or frozen, objects can be thrown, even enemies, quite frankly, or friendlies if you if that's what you're into, can be shoved off like high places or boats, and then just fall in the water, either die or take a lot of damage. Lastly, a couple of other things that I've noticed that were different from my past games, and they might help you too. The gearing game does exist, and it does change your appearance, and yes, you can have like a sexy look in Baldur's Gate 3, but it's that western style of sexy, not really the Asian high fantasy sexualized theme. There is no gear grind as you would understand it from typical MMORPGs. You log in, you do your content, dailies, weeklies, whatever, you get mats, you add a plus, you hone, you enchant your gear, and this is how you become stronger and get to overpower content. Baldur's Gate 3 does have loot and items that make you better, but it's not the main focus of the game. I'm mentioning this because even I have real life friends which cannot stand playing games that don't have a very steep gearing up curve, something that motivates them on a day-to-day basis to log in, get the things, and get themselves a little bit more power. Even MMORPGs such as Guild Wars 2, which don't have a steep gearing up curve, you get there really, really fast in a matter of weeks. They are not so motivating. And Baldur's Gate 3 is sort of on the same note, and this might be a blessing for some and a put off for others. Crafting is another familiar feature that's commonly present in MMORPGs, even in some ARPGs. Some, of course, do it better, in some it's pointless. However, in Baldur's Gate 3, the extent of crafting goes to you combining three pieces in a forge to get a specific result, maybe a staff or a spear or whatever. And so far, at least in early access, it's like it's not even there. There's also no PvP in the game, as opposed to MMORPGs or ARPGs, which most of them have it to a certain degree. And it doesn't necessarily make sense to have PvP in Baldur's Gate 3. However, the more I play the game, the more I get excited about a PvP mode where maybe myself as a real player, and then my three heroes, my four-man party, can go against another player and their three heroes, their four-man party, in like a turn-based PvP combat to see which party fares better based on our choices of classes, subclasses, races, etc. That would be super, super interesting, like an arena battlefield, or even because there is like four-man parties of four players, maybe there can be a 4 versus 4, only real players, to just match up against each other in a turn-based combat to see how they work with each other. That would be really, really cool, and it would work so well in the game as a side thing, granted, but also it would increase, in my opinion, the replayability of game. At the moment, there is no such thing. But who knows, maybe in the future they have a really good avenue to actually do it. There's also a lot of exploration to do, very worth mentioning actually. Exploration in a world where many objects are movable, so you can do crazy things, like literally crazy building things, but also many secret passages, puzzles, booby trap locations, etc. All of it taken to such an extent where you can use, for example, poison bottles from your inventory to poison the drinks of an entire camp of NPCs, killing them, and just adding even more to your own story if that's the way you want to go. So it's this kind of crazy exploration slash world discovery slash things how you can interact with the world that really make the game just special. Dungeons are also promised as part of the game, and of course the question still remains, how fun will all of this complexity that we've talked about so far be 400-500 hours into the game, and how interesting will multiclassing become later down the road, how interesting fights will become later down the road. Luckily for us, luckily for everyone, I suppose, because there's people who don't like complex things, theory crafting. They just, just wanna there for the story. And because of that, the devs actually were thoughtful enough to add 3 difficulty modes to the game itself. Right now in early access, it's on balanced mode, and then in the actual release, there's gonna be an easier mode called adventure, and then a harder mode of the game called tactician. And at the end, I wanted to make a quick note on the game's community. I did get to discover that a little bit, and it's not toxic. It's not a toxic community. So it's an overall sort of uplifting feeling in that sense. Granted, the game has been in early access, playable if you buy it since 2017, 2020, something like that. So for a few years. And still, even so, you look on Steam, the reviews are very positive. I've never actually seen a game of this type, at least, that has 50,000 reviews, out of which 88% are very positive. My conclusion is that Baldur's Gate 3 is not going to replace your MMORPG, your Diablo 4, your PoE, your whatever game that's alive and you really still enjoy playing. It's not going to do that. It's not any of these games. It's a completely different game that is going to give you a lot of quality and interesting things to do in that particular space. Just like, going out with my friends, we don't always have to go to like an intensive paintball match. Sometimes it's nice to go out with your friends, have a swim on the beach, get a drink, and just talk. And that's Baldur's Gate for me compared to my previous experiences so far. I wish you a good day. Thank you so much for your time watching this video. I'm gonna see you here on my YouTube channel really soon. Until then, take care.